staying with us. Welcome back to the final segment of Talking Points. And gentlemen, as we are closing off this discussion about public broadcasting and what is Radio St. Lucia's role, given that we're looking most likely to having the entity closed, let's look at what public broadcasting could look like after Radio St. Lucia. So what are the mechanisms or modalities that you think that a post-Radio St. Lucia public broadcasting landscape could look like?
Yeah, but even before you go there, I think we need to make a very important point. Nobody has told us how Radio St. Lucia has gotten into the situation it is financially and otherwise. And I think Alex touched on the point. We must find out how it is we got there. If we cannot do that analysis to find out where we are now, how we were before, where we are now, and where we're going, nothing is going to change. It will just be a lot of the usual talk and talk and talk. And in 5 years' time, another government comes in or whatever, we'll still be saying the very same things that we're saying there about Radio St. Lucia. Now, as to St. Lucia, without Radio St. Lucia, I can't wrap my head around that, Because, it is so important in terms of, anytime there's any disaster or anything coming, that's the first station I tune into to get my news on the weather, tracking the storm, and so on. And even after the storm, the ministers come on, they speak, and what have you. You get a lot of information, coming in. On my Sunday afternoon, that's why I listen to my oldie goldie, because even if you may not see many gray hairs, but still, that is my source of entertainment on a Sunday afternoon. Sunday morning, I'm busy doing other stuff. So, I can't wrap my head around that one yet. It to me, it's just going to be bizarre not having Radio St. Lucia.
Speak in a hypothetical,
well, no, I'm just saying, I just cannot. Yeah, I can't wrap my head, around it at this point in time. And I'm just saying, if this government goes ahead and do that, it's going to be another nail in this coffin. That's my take on it.
Strong words, Peter. Calix, do you agree?
Well, Radio St. Lucia, as far as I know, is the oldest broadcasting entity that we have in St. Lucia. I think it was established in 1971. And even before that, there was something that preceded it, from my recollection. So I think it would be a very strange move to make that decision at this point in time. Like I said earlier on, I don't think we have the evidence to say exactly, what is the true financial situation with Radio St. Lucia. As far as I know, they seem to have been going in a fairly positive direction in terms of their finances. Obviously, they've had some programming changes, and that may have affected their current financial situation. But to say that one just closes shop because of maybe a few months of poor performance, for argument's sake, it just, to me, for an organization that is 46 years old, it seems very rash. And I think that's perhaps the decision, the pronouncements that have been made by the Prime Minister are a bit premature and have not been well thought out as yet. So I think we definitely, in my opinion, there's a role for Radio St. Lucia. As I said, it can be morphed into something bigger than Radio St. Lucia in terms of a multicasting entity. But I think just more generally, we do have to have a conversation about public broadcasting, because as far as I know, under the broadcasting legislation, there is the right of the state to ensure certain broadcast standards in terms of use of various radio stations and TV stations for public broadcasting. I just don't think it's ever been utilized or affected. So I think that is something that we need to look at. And in terms of the content, the local content, as to how much that they can actually put in there, it's another area that we need to look at. It really is, for all intents, a very loosely regulated sector. Radio stations, TV stations, as far as I know, don't pay any broadcast fees or licenses. So it really is a bit of a free-for-all, which is perhaps why we're seeing such a large saturation on the open market. I think it suggests where you're at right now. I mean, if you compare us to, let's say, Barbados, or which is an even larger market than us, you don't even have anywhere near that number of radio stations and television stations as we have in St. Lucia. So one may say that may be a good sign, but as well it may also suggest that it's a pure capitalist system, and maybe there needs to be some better regulation in terms of what are the requirements, the minimum requirements and standards of service that a broadcasting entity must deliver to the public. And maybe that would mean that there may have to be some level of amalgamation along the way. But all that being said, I still think that there has to be a role to play in terms of the government, not just as a regulator of public broadcasting, but as well ensuring that there is a place for public education in broadcasting. There is a place for, as I said, minority interest in broadcasting. So I think there is a role definitely for an institution like Radio St Lucia.
Well, I think that I am definitely subject to correction. Of course, I don't have a producer and research team in my ear to feed me the facts, but I do believe that we have broadcasters are required to pay application fees for their licenses, and I am not sure, but there may also be a yearly fee for renewal and so on. So viewers, please feel free to fact check me on this matter. We will definitely have to get that information. But Mr. Clary, your colleagues here today are either unwilling or unable to envision a national broadcasting landscape without Radio St Lucia. Could you please maybe assist them and tell us how that could look? How can that look? How can the state fulfill its objectives in terms of public broadcasting and information sharing without Radio St Lucia existing as an entity?
I believe you ask yourself what would be the landscape without Radio St Lucia. I don't know if anything significant, there would be any significant difference or change if Radio St Lucia were to close its doors tomorrow. Because I say so because I don't think we have been critically looking at the whole aspect of public broadcasting, the need for it, and what it is supposed to do. And I think Alex raised a few points that I think are quite relevant in terms of the whole question of what it is that we need to be put out there with regards to the public, both in terms of the educational aspect and the entertainment aspect of it. Yes, Radio St Lucia, properly organized with specific clear directives and directions as to what it is that we want to do. I think it is critical. However, we also need to look at the ways in which that can be done other than probably just having the Radio St Lucia. Can we find other avenues to do that? Because regardless of what happens, the information without Radio St Lucia, the information would still be there, and there are a number of ways of putting the information out. Technologically, we have moved in a lot of strides. A lot of people who are now, and I agree, there are those of us who would, for whatever reason, prefer probably to listen to a particular radio station because there's something to it that we tend to cherish about certain things about probably Radio St Lucia. There are certain people who continuously listen to Radio St Lucia. There is no doubt about it. I do, on occasions when I have the time, listen to certain aspects, certain programs on Radio St Lucia, and I think that is critical, that is vital. But we also need to look at the whole question of, yes, we will say that there are certain things that money is not the only aspect. Mr. Alexander indicated that if the health sector, are you going to close down the health sector if it's not making money? But you have to look at each situation as itself, because health, we know, is a critical area that you cannot close down your health services. That's almost impossible. But we need to look at the whole question of, and I believe that if you have an entity where government is subsidizing us or putting funds into, it should be able to generate or to be able to keep fund to keep itself going. not really making a profit, but as to sustain a certain level that at least would make that thing viable. We cannot be, and as I said, you have to look at each sector. You cannot say the same for health or for education. But there are aspects that you can say, okay, how critical it is that if we maintain that aspect, what is the impact is going to be? Can we find other ways of probably doing the same thing or providing the same set of services without having to put a financial burden on the populace?
So very, very quickly, I want to make sure that we are agreeing on at least one thing. Public broadcasting, and very quickly, is it just another way of disseminating government propaganda? Or do you think that there's another service that it can provide? 2 words. Propaganda
it shouldn't be about government propaganda at all, actually. But I do think it should be about, to a certain degree, how the state coming together to decide what it wants to project and how it wants to teach its population. So there may be certain values out there that we want to inculcate in people. And that may be policy, that may be government policy. But I think it should not be just about government of the day, propaganda, so to speak. Yeah.
Subtle but critical difference. Mr. Clary?
I don't think it should ever be good at government propaganda. You're supposed to, as a government, whichever party forms the government, is the people that really matters. And I think whatever should be put out information that is in the public good, and not to sustain or to present any political party as a better alternative. The information basically should be directed towards the public in general.
And Peter?
Yeah, well, I want to take a different view in terms of how we thought about the public-private sector partnership. And that's something I think going forward we should look at. Okay, I mean, if government says they can't spend $400,000, can we get the private sector in? I mean, Radio St Lucia, as Khalid said, has a great asset base. Why wouldn't the private sector want to look at that and see if they can turn it into a profitable entity? At the same time.
Yes.
At the same time, we keep whatever programming that we need for the nation. So, as anything else, everything is unclear. The Prime Minister says one thing, as usual. The Minister says something else. And as usual, the public is left in the dark. So all I can say is let's see what happens going forward.
Peter, I think you've actually started us off on a whole different show, but unfortunately we're out of time today. Thank you, viewers, so much for tuning in to another edition of Talking Points. My guests, Mr. Peter Alexander from ONE, Mr. Emmanuel Clary of the UWP, and Mr. Calix George Jr. from the St Lucia Labour Party. Thank you so very much for joining me for this fascinating discussion. I am your host, Janika Simon. Tune in next time, same time next week for another episode of Talking Points.